The new season of wilderness survival starts with a bang. A talented woman crafts the coziest shelter decorated with fish meat, surviving in the Arctic Circle and reeling in $1 million fish. This episode's challenge unfolds at Lake Altwa, north of the Arctic Circle. This area gets rain over 200 days a year, with autumn temps hitting -22 degrees. On day 1, 8 survival experts are dropped off at different locations. The longer they survive, the better the show. After disembarking, they officially start the challenge. No one knows when they'll see the crew again. The first contestant is Gio. Coming to such a cold place, it feels like winter right from the start. Gio signed up mainly to test his limits. In truth, he's mainly after the prize money. He was thrilled stepping off the boat, seeing it as an escape. He can relish the peace of this desolate place and, best of all, avoid his demanding wife daily. At 34, Gio runs an outdoor sports club. Whenever he has free time, he goes back to his hometown. He's very good at fishing and other activities. Despite his young age, he looks quite old. He signed up to avoid his wife's constant demands. He also has time to recuperate. The first task is to find fresh water and a place to build a shelter. The second contestant, Eddie, finds the challenge in this weather just right for him. Eddie hopes to put on a good show for everyone. After landing, he looks at the waves and can't believe it's a lake. The waves are bigger than the sea, making it hard to believe it's not an ocean. Clearly, the first day is quite tough. His first task is to find a spot to pitch his tent and start a fire to keep warm. He'll just get through the first day for now. The third contestant, Jette, a 54-year-old grandma, dreams of earning money to buy a house for her 27-year-old boyfriend. Jette's location isn't too bad. The waves are small, indicating a small bay. It should be easy to catch fish here. Upon arrival, she feels quite excited. She starts wandering around aimlessly. I have no idea what she's trying to do. The fourth contestant is Ashley. Not used to using urine right away, she opted to suck the wound to clean it. The boatman joked that with Rasmus's age and looks, he'd have a hard time finding a wife in their village. Rasmus just smiled awkwardly, aware that staying single meant no one would judge his looks. Upon arriving, he felt his chances of winning were slim and decided to treat it as an experience. Rasmus found a spot that was elevated and close to a water source, but he immediately tripped. He chopped down a log and decided to build a temporary shelter. Back home, he would drink a lot of water before bed. But here, he hadn't lit a fire yet and didn't want to drink cold water, so getting a fire going was his priority. Everything was damp, making it uncomfortable to stay. Gio had already set up his temporary shelter and had some time left. He aimed to find food, considering using stones to catch fish in the ideal lake bay. Before arriving, he was anxious about food. He opted to cast a net, figuring the sooner it was set, the sooner he'd eat. He pulled the net across the lake, but the rope wasn't long enough. Koreans never complain about the environment. He decided to strip and swim across. The sixth contestant, Burke, a 51-year-old retired police officer, made his entrance. After 2 decades in the military, he retired. His first task upon arrival was to find a shelter spot, but everything was damp. With few trees around, he had to set up his shelter fast to keep his things dry. The spot he found was good, but there was a big rock he couldn't move, so he decided to find another location. He continued exploring nearby and soon found a flat area, immediately starting to build his shelter. The seventh contestant, Sonny, another 51-year-old veteran, was very excited upon arrival but unsure how long he could survive here. Lars, one of the contestants, is situated on a small hill with a wide open view. If nothing goes wrong, he'll face strong northwest winds every night. But if he wins, enduring those winds daily is worth it. Jette has found a spot and plans to build a shelter there. He casually pulls off a small tree branch. Is he going to use that branch for his tent? The wind is fierce and his shelter is pretty flimsy. It's just enough for one person to lie down. Over at Burke's spot, he's already built his shelter and is exploring the area. The wind is strong and he's worried it might blow his shelter down at night. With so much time, why not improve the shelter, start a fire, or fish instead of wasting time? Eddie is already trying to start a fire. The environment is very damp, making it really hard to get a fire going. After hours of effort, he finally got some leaves to catch fire. In his shelter, the warmth from the fire is comforting, and just seeing it makes him feel warmer. Jette is freezing now. The wind is howling, and her poorly built shelter makes it tough to get in and out. Jette lives on the island with her boyfriend. As the eldest daughter, her father raised her like a son. He used to take her hunting and fishing. Jette has always loved the outdoors and hopes to make it to the top 3 in this challenge. She believes she won't be the first to quit. Near her shelter, she dug a pit to start a fire for warmth. But with everything damp from the recent rain, starting a fire is impossible. Meanwhile, at Joe's spot, he stripped down and set a net in the freezing water, really going all out. Dragging it to the other side should boost his chances of catching fish. But does he need to wade in every time to get the net? He can't stress about that now. These initial days are for adjusting, and catching fish will make things easier. Joe's progress is unmatched. He's been all action, no downtime. Whoever sets a net first gets the first catch. The wind and waves are fierce, making fishing tough, but rough weather means more valuable fish. If he lasts, these fish might be worth a lot. He's eager for a fish feast and even drank raw water from the west side. The water source here seems pretty clean. Hopefully, 1 cup of water won't make him quit. Over at Burke's spot, he's hiding in his shelter, declaring himself the wettest man in Norway. All the branches he collected are soaked. He feels completely drenched. Even his underwear felt like it had been washed. "Hey, if you peed yourself, just say so," he muttered, staring at the small stove in front of him. He tried to start a fire to warm up, but it was pointless. Everything was soaked. He grumbled about every inch of this place. Right now, he just wanted the $1 million prize to quit and go home. On the other hand, Ashley was faring much better. He had successfully started a fire in his shelter. The shelter was built quite large, so there was no fear of it catching fire inside. He also collected a lot of dry wood. Ashley seemed to have the smoothest start. At night, every contestant seemed very uncomfortable. Given how damp everything was, who could sleep well? Burke shivered, his voice trembling as he spoke. Rasmus began to miss his mom already, showing low mental endurance on just the first day. The second day arrived. Today's weather was pretty good. The rain had stopped and the wind had calmed. He planned to start a fire to boil water and then set up nets to catch fish. It was a solid plan, but the fire just wouldn't start. He wished he'd packed more stuff in his sleeping bag. Unable to start the fire, he opted to set up the fishing nets instead, tossing lines across to catch fish. Rasmus cut down a log and stuck it by the shore, tying a rope to it. Before catching any fish, he could nibble on his fingers to stave off hunger. Meanwhile, Lars was already working on a permanent cone-shaped shelter, but it looked way too tall. He set up a tripod and covered it with a waterproof cloth, finishing it quickly. Over at Burke's side, he woke up to find rainwater inside his shelter, and his sleeping bag was wet. Building such a failed shelter, he felt that wilderness survival was not his thing. He went outside to explore and found a small stream. He wanted to take a dump nearby, but the leaves were too small. How many leaves would he need? He dug a hole in the ground and got started. He found plenty of moss too. If the leaves fell short, he could use the moss even if it was uncomfortable. Cleanliness was another issue. He could actually use his hand and then wash it clean. The scenery by the stream was very beautiful. Relieving himself here daily was a pleasure. Meanwhile, Rasmus was busy fishing and gathering wood. He was building a fish trap here. For someone so young, he was quite handy. Geo came to the shore to check his fishing net. Yesterday, he set the net here, hoping for a good catch today. He found a bamboo stick to help pull it up. Standing in the cold wind, he pulls up the net bit by bit, finally revealing the fish inside. This time, he caught 4 fish. In such a vast area, only 4 fish, and they're all small. Is it because of the cold weather? Or are there just very few fish here? Lars starts a fire to grill the fish. Today's weather is relatively good. Starting a fire is harder than catching fish. He keeps looking for materials to start the fire. He caught the fish, but the fire just won't start. It's frustrating. Over at Burke's place, he's starting on a permanent shelter too. He sets up a tripod and covers it with a waterproof sheet. It looks tough to build. It's actually not simple at all, but it's better than sleeping on the ground. Now, Burke's shelter has greatly improved. No worries about a place to stay. He needs to focus on fishing now. After a rough night's sleep and a headache today, the strong wind isn't helping either. His bald head is uncomfortable from the wind. Geo can't start a fire, so he eats the fish raw to avoid wasting them. He could have enjoyed grilled fish, but now he has to eat it raw. Eating raw fish can upset the stomach. If he has to leave due to health problems, that would be unfortunate. Still, it's a win since he got to eat fish on day 2. What surprises will the contestants face next? Stay tuned for the next episode. Surviving in the wild is really tough. After 5 days without food, he was so hungry he started chewing on a fish net. One contestant, excited after catching a fish, ran back and fell hard, resulting in a broken bone. By the 3rd day, 8 contestants remained. Eddie woke up with a splitting headache. It could be due to sleeping with his head too high and getting bitten by mosquitoes. He used a scarf to cover his head while sleeping. The uneven ground made sleeping very uncomfortable. After waking up, he brewed tea from a packet of unknown powder. I'm not sure what it was. Astley, on the other hand, went to check his fish net early in the morning, eagerly hoping to catch some fish. Despite being a novice, Astley was thrilled at the mere idea of catching fish, even before seeing one. He slowly pulled up the fish net and saw a fish inside. The first fish gave him a lot of confidence, and he quickly caught a second one. He kept pulling fish out of the net one by one. He was indeed quite lucky. Burke, meanwhile, woke up and wandered around aimlessly. He was waiting for the rain to stop so he could set his fish net. This meant that as long as it kept raining, he couldn't catch any fish. I think he wasn't thinking clearly, wasting time wandering around instead of trying to fish. He looked at the fast-flowing stream, constantly imagining if he would slip if he stood on the rocks. Burke, a retired police chief with 30 years of experience guarding ponds and completing missions, should theoretically know a lot about wilderness survival. He should have decent survival skills, but his performance so far hasn't shown much capability. He's just wasting time. ID was already fishing, hoping for breakfast. A big fish would be his meal. If he caught a small one, he would use it as bait. He reeled in his line but found no fish. With no fish to eat, he could only drink water. He found plenty of berries and picked some to eat. While gathering them, he noticed bear droppings nearby. This was very close to his shelter. If a bear attacked, ID would surely be in big trouble. In addition to bears, there were plenty of deer, but they lacked bows and arrows for hunting. Meanwhile, Astley was busy mending his fish net. Although he caught a few fish today, the net had large holes. If he didn't fix them, it would be harder to catch fish next time. Astley spent 2 hours repairing 4 holes. He wasn't in a rush, but fixing the net is a boring task for him. Fixing the net is tedious, but with fish to eat today, Astley doesn't mind the extra work. Meanwhile, Sonny came up empty-handed when he checked his net. He was at a loss for what to do next. He plans to modify the net by attaching some foam to it. This way, it will float on the water, which might increase his chances of catching fish. He took the net back to the shore, hoping to catch something this time. While setting the net, he carelessly tossed it and blamed the strong waves. Combined with the cold weather, he lost his temper. Jette, on the other hand, tried to start a fire again after waking up but failed. The fire-making ordeal drove him crazy. Gio also couldn't start a fire, so he had to eat the fish he caught yesterday raw. The taste was pretty disgusting, but to survive, eating a fish felt like torture. Razmu was also pulling in his net. A fish was struggling in the net, which would be his lunch. He roasted it and ate it, though it didn't taste great. But it was still better than eating raw fish like Gio. After eating, he felt incredibly bored. These guys really can't be allowed to eat their fill. They're fine when they're hungry, but once they're full, they start daydreaming. Astley finally finished repairing the net. Next, they'll have the fish pond caught for dinner. He's having a great time. Burke, meanwhile, is at the shore carving a stick. He was making a fishing rod, meticulously shaping it with a knife, essentially just wasting time. As night fell, Razmu felt extremely bored. Every contestant seemed to be struggling to adapt. On the 4th day, Burke woke up feeling very hungry, having not eaten for several days. It rained non-stop today, which Burke found very unfavorable, but he couldn't care less and put the net in the water. If he had set the net yesterday, he might have had fish to eat today. Sonny, on the other hand, didn't set his net yesterday because the waves were too strong. But to survive here, he must learn to catch fish. He plans to build a raft so he can place the net in deeper water. Building a raft is a huge task, and he started crying right away. If he wants to cry, he should just go home. This show is for tough people. If he's a wimp, he should hide under the covers. Sonny's used to playing with inflatable rafts at home, so he knows a bit about making them, but it's still a huge task. But I never expected him to make a mini version of the raft. I really wanted to throw a slipper at him. I made a circle and wished he wouldn't win. He took the raft to the shore to set up the net. I really hope he doesn't catch any fish. Burke still hadn't set up his fish net after hours. A strong current in the stream scared him. Seriously? Next time, don't tell people you're a retired police chief. It's embarrassing. At least he finally made it to the other side and pulled the rope. He laid the fish net flat in the water to boost his chances of catching something. After setting it up, he sat down, on the verge of tears. He likely felt that every task was a huge challenge and believed he had faced significant hurdles just to set up the fish net. The biggest failure in wilderness survival is that contestants can quit without any penalty. If contestants who quit on a whim were fined $100,000, I bet these crybabies would go bankrupt. He started missing his family at home. Contestants who miss their families often don't last. I hope he quits soon. Meanwhile, at Jette's place, he struggled to survive the first 3 days. Today, he plans to set up a fishing net. With 2 bundles of rope in front of him, he pulled out his gloves, noticed the ropes fit through the holes, and felt like he'd made a groundbreaking discovery. He should rush to apply for a Nobel Prize for this. He removed the metal ring and made some odd movements. The rope pulled through the ring more easily. If setting up a fish net is this tedious, he should spend his time catching fish instead of wasting it here. He took the rope to the shore and pulled it through the water. Just doing this little bit made his heart race, feeling the effects of age and waning stamina. Meanwhile, Rasmus worked on a pier to set up his fish net. He organized ropes in his shelter and reminisced about being a Boy Scout. After hours of listening, I still couldn't grasp his point. His slow pace makes me anxious. At last, Auntie Jette began setting up her net. This was a huge win for her. She should definitely tell her boyfriend how great she is. Jette can't wait to catch some fish to eat. If she can't catch fish with this, she might have to leave. Meanwhile, Sunny spent hours tinkering with his mini raft. In the end, it proved successful. Hurry up and set up a net. You've wasted another day. He kept playing with the raft here. Sister, are you fishing or playing fetch? You're handling that net like a kid with a toy. You're as immature as the kids back home. You're a day behind. He realized his method was failing. You've been aimlessly wandering all day. How do you expect it to work? On the 5th day, Eddie came up with a method. He threw the net into the water and used a stick to push it out. He hoped to get the net into deeper water this way, but isn't the effectiveness of this method dependent on the length of his stick? It didn't really work. Maybe they don't even know how to make a raft. Burke came early to check his net. He'd been surviving on berries for 2 days and craved fish today. As he approached, he spotted a fish in the water. When he lifted the net, he saw several fish in the net, but it was snagged on the bottom. As he went to get something to free it, he tripped. He hadn't even eaten any fish yet, and he was already down. It hurt so much. Hearing his cries of pain, the crew rushed over. Burke was just standing there. His rib was visibly deformed, clearly broken. He had just caught a fish today, but now he had to withdraw. After 5 days of starvation and then breaking a bone, it's hard to say much about this kind of exit, just really unlucky. Burke held back his tears, but withdrawing was inevitable. This survival experience would be unforgettable for him. I never expected him to leave this way. Now, there are 7 contestants left. ID still hadn't set his net properly. He looked at his method, which wasn't working at all. Who knew setting a net would be so difficult? Sunny checked the net he set up yesterday but found it empty. Maybe his hunger made him imagine it was full of fish. He was eating fish with his mouth. What surprises will the contestants face next? Stay tuned for the next episode. He stumbled upon a bit of wild cotton, which acted like a magic fire starter. One tiny spark and his whole shelter was smoking like crazy. In no time, it became a smoke bomb, and watching the old man get smoked out was hilarious. On day 5, at Joe's place, he checked his nets early and caught a good haul. After days without sun, it finally appeared today. The sunlight lifted his spirits, and Gio sorted his fishing nets, catching plenty of fish. Eating well gave him more energy for drying fish. This time, Gio finally got a fire going and fried the fish in an iron pan. After eating his fill, he began building his shelter. Meanwhile, over at Eddie's place, Eddie had no luck with fishing, so he decided to hunt for mushrooms instead. After some searching, he found a few. Sitting by the shore, he spotted a deer but had no bow and arrow to hunt it. There was no way to hunt it. It's not that he couldn't afford deer meat, but mushrooms were more cost-effective. Over at Ashley's place, he planned to start building a permanent shelter today. The area didn't have many large trees, just some small ones. Building a log cabin shelter was really difficult. He could only build a wooden frame on the existing foundation. She headed to the shore to find wood. Earlier, while getting water, she saw many discarded planks there. She gathered them up. She returned to enhance her shelter, but the planks resembled a raft. Fate handed her a fishing opportunity. She saw this as a chance to get ahead. She wasn't your average girl. If her shelter was too high, she'd just climb a tree to fix it. With a few quick moves, she erected a tall shelter. Meanwhile, Eddie had zero interest in mushroom foraging. She kept worrying about the fishing nets. The bay was too shallow for deep water placement. Honestly, it wasn't that hard. He just overthought it. He wanted to stand and easily catch a bunch of fish. In the end, he couldn't care less. He tossed the fishing net into the water, leaving his catch to fate. Meanwhile, Jette was living off fragrant fruits daily. Today, he finally checked his nets, hoping for a catch. He walked over and pulled them up. A fish was struggling in the net. As the net was gradually pulled up, more and more fish were caught. He had the best setup for fishing nets. He hauled in 10 fish at once, enough for 2 days. His first successful catch boosted his confidence, making today a feast day. Meanwhile, at Rasmus's place, he gathered a bunch of discarded planks, some still with nails. To most people, this would be junk. But for a survivalist, it's a goldmine. Rasmus plans to upgrade his shelter with these materials, starting with a makeshift chair. With a few quick tweaks, he made a wilderness bench. He put it in his shelter and took a seat. Rasmus saw two glaciers forming on the distant mountaintop, signaling that it had started snowing heavily up there. The temperature was falling quicker than he expected. He had to hurry and finish his shelter or he'd freeze in the winter. Jette had already cooked the fish. After being hungry for so long, finally getting a bite of fish felt amazing. He scarfed down 7 fish in one sitting but saved the other 3 for a midnight snack. While munching on the fish, he hoped to catch more tomorrow. On the 6th day, Ashley was up early. He headed to the shore to gather planks, hauling all the usable wood back to his shelter. It beat chopping down a tree. But making dozens of trips back and forth was still a lot of work. For him, working was a kind of joy. At least I'm not the one getting tired. Ashley added the collected wood to the shelter's framework, making it sturdier. Jette began working on his shelter early in the morning, collecting plenty of wood, but he moved at a snail's pace. He worked for half an hour and rested for half an hour. He built his shelter on a tree trunk. How was he going to sleep at night? The participants began building their shelters, knowing that a good night's sleep was crucial for survival. But the shelters they built were all similar, not the log cabin I was hoping for. Gio added a door to his shelter. Does he actually believe that tiny tent will get him through winter? ID stashed a ton of wood in his shelter. The bed wasn't great, but the shelter had plenty of space. He even built a stone fireplace inside. The shelter's roof had a clever skylight, providing good lighting and ventilation. Jette's shelter fell apart again. He planned to rebuild it. Could those few small sticks really support any weight? He might as well build a trapezoid. Jette stood there pondering for ages before deciding to take a break. Just by glancing at the participants, it was clear some were just filling spots. Rasmus's shelter resembled a doghouse. He checked the fishing net, hoping for a catch to fuel his work. He'd built a fishing platform, but it was too close to shore. But he set it up too close to the shore, so he only caught 1 fish, which wasn't enough for him. He stood by the shore at a loss. After eating this fish, he'd be hungry again in a few hours. Anyway, he was very anxious now. Actually, there's no need to worry. Just set the net and you'll catch fish. Eddie came to check his net too. He's been here a week without catching any fish. He left half the net in the water, likely to save some energy. He set the net near the shore and, luckily, caught a small fish. Looks like these fish were conserving energy too. Just 1 fish decided to get caught, but that was enough to cheer Eddie up. Meanwhile, Larsmu stood with a cup of water, looking confused. The net was too high above the water, so no fish were getting caught. With no fish, he was stuck eating berries. He was lost in thought. If he used corn as bait, he'd catch plenty of fish. Stop daydreaming. If you have corn, you might as well make corn pancakes. Meanwhile, Lars was scouring the shore for food. This plant was what he sought. This plant was great for tea. Whenever Lars had fish, he picked these wild veggies for soup. A balanced diet is healthier. He focused on dietary fiber, believing it was key to staying healthy. Meanwhile, Eddie was grilling fish. Grilled fish was delicious, but too much could lead to constipation. For Eddie, who hadn't eaten properly in days, that was the least of his concerns. But if he skipped the grilled fish, he'd starve. Better to be full than hungry. After eating, he could hope for a good bowel movement at night. On the 7th day, Gio started working early. Today, he was going to build a stone fireplace. It was really cold at night. Building a stone fireplace was essential for warmth. He built it next to his shelter, with the opening facing inward. At night, he could sit inside and stay warm by the fire. It took a lot of stones to build the fireplace. He went to the shore to collect stones with his backpack. This work was very exhausting, but the fireplace he built looked great. He filled the gaps between the stones with sand. Seeing his tool gave me a brain freeze. You're in the wild, and you brought a cement trowel for a fireplace? Seriously, did you pack shampoo and body wash too? Han Pirasum sweats buckets daily. He's slowly adjusting, working an hour and daydreaming the rest. He's an introverted guy who doesn't talk much at home, but here, he can't stop talking. He can sip on a cup of water for an entire day. Joe's got his fireplace set up, but who knows if it'll work. He's gearing up to light a fire inside. While working outside today, I found some cotton grass. It's great for starting fires. I placed a few leaves under the cotton. Just a quick strike with the fire starter, and the cotton ignites easily. It looks simple, and it really is. The fire is going, but there's a lot of smoke. The fireplace looks nice, but it doesn't vent the smoke. Gio is getting smoked out inside his shelter. It's warm to sleep in, but he might wake up smoked like a piece of jerky. At first, he thought it was just regular smoke, but it got stronger and started to engulf the entire shelter. If Gio stayed in there another second, he might have suffocated. When he opened the door, he saw something amazing. The chimney was smoking. Despite the thick smoke, Gio explained the chimney problem to us. After designing a new solution, he was sure it would solve the smoke problem. Then he took a blanket to get water. Now it's day 8. Jette headed to the shore early to check his nets but came up empty. Exhausted, he devours any fish he catches in one sitting. When there's no fish, he feels defeated. Watching Jette now, it's clear he won't last. He even lost a glove while fishing earlier. Now he doesn't even want to work. Meanwhile, Ashley started moving today, after 8 days of hunger. He's finally working on his second shelter. Isn't he worried about overdoing it? The new place is quite roomy. And it even has a wooden bed. Jette also dismantled his shelter to build a new one. Though she's old, the granny loves to tinker. Living in the wild, she finds going to the bathroom at night the most troublesome. At 54, she has to go 7 or 8 times a night, so she just dug a hole in the shelter to solve the problem. Going to the bathroom at night drains her energy. Ashley, on the other hand, has made his shelter very neat and tidy, placing everything in order. It looks just like a home. Ashley must be planning to stay here long term. It was so cozy, I wanted to move in with him. Meanwhile, Jette was redoing her tent with a dirt floor. She loves building shelters but just doesn't have the strength. Since she can't live in a big house, she has to make do with this small tent. On the 9th day, Rasmus woke up feeling extremely tired and didn't have enough food to eat. Lying on the uneven ground every day, feeling tired is already a blessing. Not being dead tired is thanks to Jesus. He headed to the shore to check the fish net and, luckily, caught a lively fish. But Rasmus quickly put an end to its struggle. It had no option but to be smashed by a rock. Catching a fish gave Rasmus renewed hope. It's not that he couldn't catch fish. He had simply put the net in a dangerous spot. The 2 fish he caught today were enough to sustain him. For the first time, he realized how tough life could be. He mostly chatted and did little each day. Mosquitoes were Rasmus's biggest gripe. Back at the shelter, he fried the fish. It's been nearly 10 days, and he still hasn't set any goals or improved the shelter. 10 days is a milestone for him. It's obvious he's just here to pass the time. Not improving the tent means he has no intention of staying. Meanwhile, Jette. She sat on a rock, pondering her life. Grandma, if you're bored, just head home early. Staying here is pointless. On the 10th day, the show's boat appeared early in the morning. Who's going to quit the competition? I think it's Jette. Rasmus is also a strong possibility. Sure enough, I guessed right. It was the grandma. Did she spend 10 days here just for the experience? She initially said she wanted to buy a house for her boyfriend, but she's done nothing. But she kept saying she's strong and never gives up. These foreigners, I tell you, full of nonsense. Only someone tough could say that. With Jette out, 6 contestants remain. What surprises will the remaining contestants bring? Stay tuned for the next episode. This has to be the most fun wilderness survival ever. The talented woman built a stunning shelter and catches fish until her hands ache. She cooks the fish over the fire and eats it daily. It's day 10 and 6 contestants remain. Sunny headed to the shore at dawn to gather berries. With no fish caught, berries are all he has to eat. The weather is freezing now, and just being outside for a bit makes his nose run like mad. After 10 days in the wild, Sunny is slowly getting used to life here, but the hunger keeping him awake is tough. He really hopes his net has some fish. When he checks the fishing net, he finds nothing. Sunny's luck is truly terrible. The area is full of rocks, which makes fishing difficult. Sunny, who caught nothing, shed a symbolic tear. Meanwhile, Eddie returned from a scenic bathroom break. He finds the place stunning and feels honored to relieve himself in such a beautiful setting. The wind is quite strong today. Eddie worries the wind will take his fishing net, and the strong waves make catching fish tough, even for a pro. But old Mo might have better luck. Meanwhile, at Larsmo's place, he's lighting a fire at his shelter's entrance. There's a small piece of fish in the pot. Cooking breakfast is tough, even with such a tiny fish, but being able to eat meat is already quite good. The biggest problem now is that Larsmo feels very bored. This is the kind of boredom that hits after a good meal. He has no interest in upgrading his shelter. The fish sizzles in the pot, and berry tea is boiling in the kettle. This guy really knows how to enjoy himself. Recently, he found many wooden planks on the shore. They are so beautiful that he can't bear to burn them, so he carves patterns on them to pass the time. I don't see any plan in him. I guess the show invited him just to fill in. After spending an hour, he finally finished carving. Once he has nothing to do, he turns into a clueless fool, constantly needing to find tasks, like pulling out a nail and hammering it back in. He can repeat this process 1,000 times. Larsmo nailed a nameplate to a tree. For him, this was like completing a major task. With his current state, I doubt he will survive the next episode. Eddie is preparing to check the fishing net. The waves are rough, and Eddie isn't sure if there are any fish. On the shore, he hopes old Mo will show up. Eddie starts collecting the fishing net from the water. The cold and hunger make his stomach tense. He hoisted the nets up despite not seeing any fish. Fortunately, he managed to catch a few. He caught several fish in the nets. Today, he got 7 fish. Maybe it's the environment, but the fish here are all thin and small. ID lit a fire to cook the fish. After days of hunger, he could finally have a fish feast. He eagerly devoured the fish meat. Sunny checked the second fishing net. From the shore, he didn't see anything, but as he got closer, he found a fish caught near the bank. Even though it was small, it was still something. Handling the fish for just a few minutes left Sunny's hands frozen stiff. Age was catching up. He had to stay active to keep his blood flowing. As he worked on the fish, he mused that foreigners had no clue about making fish head soup. How to make the most of this pound of fish meat? In just a short time, his hands were frozen again. Wouldn't it be better to warm up in the shelter? Why stay here? He tried to cook the fish, but the fire just wouldn't start. He was so frustrated he didn't know what to do. Over at Joe's place, the weather was surprisingly good today. He even went for a swim. While Granny Sunny was freezing, he dared to take a bath. Young guys are indeed full of energy. After his swim, he warmed up by the shore. I just couldn't wrap my head around it. Sometimes the contestants' actions are beyond me. Hopefully, later he won't just sit here wasting time, not catching fish or improving the shelter. Meanwhile, Sunny kept trying to start a fire. Luckily, he finally got the fire going. Without it, he might have had to eat raw fish. He deboned the cooked fish and enjoyed a plate of meat. If he could stir-fry it with some rice, it would probably taste amazing. After finishing the fish, Sunny started exercising again. Eating alone didn't keep him warm. He went back to the shelter, his feet numb from the cold. Why is this granny so inactive? With such poor health, he still chose to survive in the wilderness. It's really tough for him. Over at Lars' place, he was gathering wood, but his tiny saw made the job tough. Squatting too long hurt his back. What should have taken just a few minutes, took hours with that small saw. Lars hoped to stay here longer. He planned his daily tasks and worked hard to improve the shelter. Lars was the only contestant who seemed normal to me. Over at Lars's place, once he had free time, he would endlessly chatter to himself in the shelter, recounting tales from his childhood up to his elementary school graduation. He talks non-stop until he gets to his elementary school graduation. As night falls, Larsmo lights a fire in the shelter and prepares a fish for dinner. He's had 58 fish in 10 days and wonders how many contestants remain. He's all alone out here, and the nights can get eerily quiet. On the early morning of the 11th day, Ashley is still awake. He just went out to pee, and it's freezing outside. When he first arrived, nights were terrifying, but he's slowly adjusting. He woke up early today. Last night's movements were so big that his small wooden bed collapsed. A bed built like that is definitely unstable. Ashley's shelter is currently the best, at least it's comfortable. Over at Larsmo's, he starts his day by boiling water. His shelter is probably the worst. He complains every day about how boring it is. If he really has no survival plan, he should just leave early. He doesn't hunt or fish, and the moment he wakes up, he starts rambling about his magical split pants stories. I'm fed up with his stories. Today, he finally decided to get up. He can't just stay in the shelter all day. Larsmo heads to the shore to explore, wandering aimlessly to test his limits. It's clearly another waste of time. Meanwhile, at Eddie's, he's still in bed. Once up, he makes charcoal toothpaste, smears it on his brush, and starts brushing. It's a solid technique. His teeth always come out clean. After brushing, he heads to check his nets. Yesterday, he caught 7 fish, but today he got nothing. For him, fishing is like a lottery. Without catching fish, he doesn't know what he's doing here. He sits on the ground, pondering today's meal. If he doesn't catch fish, he can still eat berries. But he's not here for fun, he's here to survive. As he walks the shore, thoughts of home already creep in. These contestants are really something else. Sunny wakes up early to make wooden toys. Despite her age, the old lady's standards are sky high. Even if you pulled a few guys from the comment section, they likely wouldn't measure up. Making wooden toys is Sunny's way of passing the time. While Larsmo was out exploring, he discovers a herd of deer. If he could bag a deer, he'd have roasted meat daily and an easy ride to the finish. Snow's already piling up halfway up the mountain. He stands there, gazing into the distance and yelling about hard work. It's a total waste of time and energy. Meanwhile, Eddie, he's foraging pine nuts for breakfast, which can season the fish. He gathered a few. He roasted the pine nuts over the fire and crushed them for seasoning. Eddie made a wooden toy, but it's just for display. Sunny's toy is different. Even though they're both toys, they have different uses. Eddie's shelter still has some uneaten fish hanging. He eats yesterday's catch in portions. Ashley went to check his nets at the shore, not expecting much, but as he pulled them tighter, one by one, he pulled fish from the water. Today was a good haul. With 18 fish in his net, he headed back to his shelter. It's truly feast or famine. He cleaned the fish at the creek. These 18 fish will last him a while. If he eats 3 fish a day, today's catch will last 6 days. Too bad foreigners don't eat fish heads. Those 18 heads are wasted. You could make at least one meal from the fish heads. Ashley roasted the skewered fish. Larsmo wandered aimlessly all day. He even claimed it was a beautiful day. He must be starving to the point of delirium. It's day 12 now, and Sonny wants to go hiking. He has no food, but he's going hiking. Are these guys on vacation? He stumbled upon a small stream and drank from it. He drank directly from it. It's melted snow, so it should be fine. Others in the wilderness are busy building shelters or finding food. But he's either starving or treating this like a holiday. Sonny climbed a hill where the wind was strong. His nose was dripping from the cold. Why climb here? Wouldn't it be smarter to focus on surviving and winning the prize? Eddie headed to the shore early to check his nets. The waves were much bigger than yesterday when it was calm and he caught nothing. He didn't think he'd catch anything today, but he got one. His fingers nearly froze stiff while sorting it out. He guessed the wind was at least minus 10 degrees, but at least he caught something better than coming back empty-handed. Meanwhile, all Larsmo does is make a fire and boil water daily. Today, he climbed the mountain for the view again. This isn't the survival show I signed up for. If you really have no plan, just go home early. Don't waste screen time here. Larsmo didn't expect it to be this boring here. He began to regret it. When Sonny got back from hiking, she yelled to see if her boyfriend had made dinner. She's always so dramatic. Today, she checked the fishing nets again but came up empty. Despite being hungry for days, Sonny still makes wooden toys. With no food, she finds some fun in making toys. She also made a door for the shelter, even if it's not very useful. But it's better than no door at all. On the 13th day, Eddie woke up early and said he slept very well last night. Sonny headed to the shore early to check her fishing nets. She hasn't caught any fish for 2 days now and is starting to feel homesick. Larsmo realizes this place is tougher than he thought. When the show's boat showed up, he chose to quit. He keeps returning. He hasn't demonstrated any survival skills. His shelter is poorly built, and he wastes every day doing nothing. I wish the show would slap a hefty fine on these quitters, like tens of thousands of dollars. It'd definitely weed out the uncommitted ones. So, what surprises will the contestants bring us next? Stay tuned for the next episode. This is the most enjoyable wilderness survival I've ever seen. With one cast, he caught over 100 pounds of fish and fried up a big pot, which stuffed him. With no worries about food, he started tidying his shelter. Life is quite comfortable for him. On the 13th day, Sonny boiled water early in the morning. It's been 13 days without a bath, and every night I itch like crazy. Today, Sonny decided to take a bath using hot water to soak a towel. He wiped his armpits and then his arms. I didn't expect his idea of a bath to be just wiping his armpits. He even had tissues ready and used his armpits to test me. Gio woke up with sunlight on his head, just sitting there, soaking up the intelligence from the rays. It made him feel better. The weather was great, so he went to the shore to sunbathe. Now he's very hungry, and even pooping feels like a luxury. With no food, he can only stand in the sun to absorb energy. He plans to check the fishing net, hoping to catch something. Every time he goes to collect the fishing net, he has to get into the water. To place the net deeper, he can only choose this spot. The net was slowly pulled up, but he didn't see any fish. Ashley felt warmer today than the previous 3 days. The sunlight on the shelter looked very warm. She slept in her clothes last night and woke up still wearing them. Seeing the sunlight again improved her mood a lot. She poops in this bay every day, and after that, she acts a bit crazy by the shore. Today's net caught a lot of fish, and they were quite big. She caught a total of 20 fish, enough to eat for several days. Previously worried about not catching fish, now she only worries about how to preserve them. Ashley is living the best life now. The fish she caught today were very big. One fish is enough for a meal. Gio finally caught a fish, but without comparison, there's no harm. This fish is barely enough for him to survive here. The fish is very small, not enough for a meal. Now Gio feels very hungry and misses his home's roast pork sandwich and cola. Gio is starving, but Ashley is different. She has no worries about food and drink, just wants to make her sleeping area better. Sleeping well at night is her biggest wish. Gio doesn't have enough fish, so he picks berries. While picking berries, he smells a strong urine odor. The smell is so strong that he loses interest in picking berries. He needs to find out where the smell is coming from. Back at the shelter, he smells his pants and confirms that the smell is from his 13-day-old unwashed pants. It's a miracle he hasn't been knocked out by the smell, but recently he's eaten a lot of berries, so the smell has a strong berry scent. This can't go on, so he decides to try fishing. On the 10th day, he started preparing fishing tools. Gio chose a piece of wood as a handle, just needed a simple polish to use it for fishing. He took the makeshift tool to the shore to fish. This guy is quite smart, making a fishing tool out of a simple stick. Hopefully, he can catch a big fish. Eddie just came back from fishing, processing the fish meat and putting the extra fish on the fire to smoke them into jerky. Eddie has been eating berries for a long time, so eating fish today is a stroke of luck. In cold weather, the body needs more protein. Without fish, he would really starve. One meal can only eat one fish. After eating, he goes outside to sunbathe to replenish energy. Ashley is living the most comfortably now, catching so many fish that she can eat her fill every meal. Gio is still struggling to get fish, while she easily catches dozens of fish and has so many left that she doesn't even bother setting the net today. After eating her fill, she lies on the ground to sunbathe. Eddie goes back to the shelter and starts acting crazy, banging a stick on the iron pot. It's obvious. People with food and those without are in completely different states. The well-fed are napping, the hungry are fishing, and the in-between are going nuts. The fish can hang uneaten, but the water on the fire must keep boiling. He'd rather pee more often than stop drinking to stay warm. Gio has been fishing for hours without any luck. The lake water is cleaner than his wallet. Now he gives up and puts his hope back on the fishing net. As long as the net is placed far enough, there's a chance to catch fish. If this continues, he will soon quit the challenge. Those without food only think about eating. Ashley is cooking dinner by the shore, and after eating, she sits by the shore in a daze. On the 14th day, Ashley wakes up early, her hair flowing beautifully. I personally think it's very stylish. In the wilderness, having a big bird's nest on your head definitely complements nature. Now Ashley poops every 3 days, which she thinks is great. I can't imagine pooping every 3 days. I poop 3 times a day. Every morning, she puts on a set of clothes. Today, she plans to make smoked fish. The shelter has collected a lot of firewood, enough for her to use. Eddie wakes up early and decides to go hiking. These guys amaze me. Even though they've caught a lot of fish, they still go hiking. Why not spend some time building a nice shelter? Sometimes seeing these foreigners so relaxed, it's definitely not because they are well off. It's just pure laziness. Lars also went hiking. This guy has the least screen time, and now it's the 5th episode, with less than 20 minutes of footage. If he wins, it would definitely be a scam. Ashley not only organized a big bag of firewood but also brought many stones to make the shelter very beautiful. This girl lives a very refined life, with a big string of fish meat beside her. Looking at this shelter, I also want to live with her. Cooking and living together would be great. Her hair may be a bit messy, but the shelter is very orderly. This should be the most beautiful shelter I've ever seen. With no worries about food and drink, she is full of hope for life. Eddie is grilling fish by the shore. This guy is also enjoying himself, eating 1 fish per meal. As long as he doesn't starve, he tries to live like he's on vacation. He wasted a whole day doing nothing and still has the mood to skip stones. I can't stand these contestants being so relaxed. Dude, please do something, okay? Sitting here in a daze, what's the point? Sunny is also acting crazy here. If you're sick, go home and see a doctor. I'm a wilderness survival commentator, not a psychiatrist. Sunny looks like a madwoman, taking out a sleeping mat and banging it around. After acting crazy, she sits by the shore in a daze. This is clearly the loneliness after excitement. But in this scene, finding the right angle would make a beautiful photo. The photographer would probably drool over this shot. With so much free time, Eddie thinks he has plenty of time to sit and think. He's not Einstein, with a peanut-sized brain thinking so much. These contestants are all daydreamers. Lars has climbed to the top of the mountain. This guy, I don't know what he's doing. I've never seen him. It's been over 10 days, and he has barely appeared. He still has the energy to hike. He hiked for 5 or 6 hours today. Without a few beef burgers to replenish his energy, he probably won't survive tomorrow. After getting tired, he drinks a cup of water, not afraid of diarrhea at all. As night falls, there's movement in Ashley's shelter. A mouse, which has been lurking around, appears. It's clearly eyeing Ashley's fish. What I didn't expect was that it was so bold to steal food. Ashley just watches without doing anything. The mouse crawls all over the fish. Doesn't she plan to eat it? On the 15th day, Ashley wakes up early, grinning widely. The mouse's visit last night made her feel wonderful. Maybe she hasn't seen a mouse in a long time. Gio checks the shore early in the morning. There are many things to check. He wants to check the fishing net. After eating, he plans to hike. As he approaches, he doesn't see any fish. Gio really hopes to catch fish. Meanwhile, Ashley continues to perform steadily, catching 7 fish today. It's like the heavens are feeding her. Gio isn't so lucky, catching only 1 fish, just enough to sustain him. Today's weather is very cold, making Ashley cry. The lake is shrouded in thick fog, looking like a fairyland. But I don't know why she's crying. If she really doesn't like fish, she could give some to Gio. Gio is so hungry that he doesn't dare to poop, eating only 1 fish a day. Today he decides to hike. The surrounding mountains are very beautiful, but I don't understand. Why waste energy hiking when you're so hungry? Wouldn't it be better to spend more time catching fish? If you're not here for the prize money, don't waste a spot. Eddie suns himself by the shore early in the morning. He still has leftover fish, collects some pine needles to boil water, and makes a water bag to store water. Is he going to take a bath? Turns out, he uses hot water to wash his hair. But he's not the only one washing up. Lars also prepares to bathe in his shelter. He boils pot after pot of hot water, pours it into a waterproof bag, and starts washing. Can you believe not bathing for over 10 days? days? He even takes out shampoo. On the 4th day, he showed that he brought shampoo. These guys aren't serious about survival. They didn't bring much survival gear but brought shampoo. After washing his hair, Eddie looks more handsome and confident. He feels he can win just because he washed his hair. Did he wash away his worries? He lies on a stone slab to rest. Geo is still exploring on foot. The surroundings are desolate, with few people and even fewer animals. This hike makes him very happy. He starts playing in the snow at the top of the mountain. These guys treat survival like a vacation. They don't bother improving their shelters or making tools. Once they're fed, they start exploring. After relaxing, Geo descends the mountain. Eddie is so bored he wants to sleep. He just sits there, clueless. His only task is checking the fishing net. Maybe they can't build anything. Their survival skills are lacking. Bear Grylls would thrive here for weeks. On day 16, Geo complains about getting only 3 hours of sleep. Eddie marks his 16 days with a piece of wood, still bored. Geo isn't much better. The show's boat arrives. Who's quitting? Turns out, it's Eddie. Despite having plenty of fish, he decides to quit, wasting a spot. I hope the show finds him tens of thousands. What surprises will the contestants bring us in the next episode? Stay tuned for the next update. Give him a frog as a pet and he can decapitate it, skin it, and toss it into a pot, completely disregarding any past friendship. Leaving a whole skeleton is respectful enough. This is what wilderness survival is all about. It's day 17 with 4 contestants remaining. Early in the morning, Geo hears a noise outside his tent and wakes up to investigate. He goes out to check and finds a tree frog on his shelter. Faced with this unexpected midnight snack, Geo is already prepared with his pot. He scoops the frog into it. I wouldn't dare eat it, but at least he has breakfast sorted for tomorrow. This morning, it's much colder. Sunny wakes up shivering, with temperatures down by about 10 degrees. She rises to check her fish nets, hoping for a catch. Pulling them in by the shore, her hands quickly go numb from the cold. She keeps moving her arms to stay warm. She catches a fish and whacks it with a stick. It's just one fish. No need to be so harsh, right? Sunny squats by the shore, prepping the fish and grumbling about the cold. Once done, she resets the nets. Otherwise, she'll starve tomorrow. Geo arrives at the shore with an axe and a pot for breakfast. The pot holds the frog he caught last night. He inspects it closely. These foreigners have odd eating habits. They avoid fish heads. But he has no qualms about this frog. He chops off the frog's head with the axe, skins it, and there's just a bit of meat left. But it's enough for his breakfast. Suddenly, Sunny starts crying. She thinks it's too cold here. For crying out loud, if you wanna cry, go home. This show is for tough folks, not for crying all the time. It feels like I owe you big time. She keeps prepping the fish by the shore. She skips the big fish head. 2 fish today barely make 1 meal. She keeps moving around, clearly struggling with the cold. Geo swiftly places the frog on the iron plate to fry, and the aroma is quite tempting. Once cooked, he eats half of it, feeling like this lunch is more of a snack. He munches on the frog, savoring every bite. It's not much, but it's better than nothing. Soon, he's picked the frog clean and is thankful to have made it through another day. Yet, the ongoing worry about his next meal persists, makes him very anxious. Eating fish seems more practical. Over at Lars' place, his shelter is very tall, but not very spacious. Inside, it looks like a doghouse filled with various items. He can even make a fire inside to keep warm. Outside, there's plenty of wood and clothes drying. The Fish King is recharging too, though I've never seen him catch any fish. Does this guy even need to eat? He wastes time all day long. Over at Ashley's place, he has a big plan today. He's had this plan in mind for a while. Back at his shelter, he lights a fire to warm up and starts crafting a cup. He'd always wanted to carve a wooden cup but didn't want to waste time on it before sorting out his food and shelter. Now that those worries were gone, crafting a cup is a great way to kill time when I'm bored. Just carve out a piece of wood and voila, a cup. Crafting makes him feel accomplished. Geo woke up and went west to brush his teeth. Poor guy, he only catches 1 fish a day. He's about to give up. Instead of improving his shelter, he just gathers berries daily and built a pointless signal fire on the shore. This isn't a deserted island scenario, so why build a signal fire? On day 18, Lars went to the shore early to check his fish nets. The morning is freezing. Lars slowly pulls up the net, initially finding no fish. As he keeps pulling, fortunately, luck was on his side, and he managed to catch a fish in the net. Although the fish wasn't very small, it still wasn't enough for a day's meal. Every time, it's just a bit of fish, barely enough to get by. Lars took the fish back to his shelter. He always has to trek a long way back. This fish is a total bust. Meanwhile, Ashley opts for a hike today. She's not concerned about food anymore. This beach is a goldmine for her. Since catching that first fish on day 1, she's been reeling in fish non-stop and is super confident every time she goes fishing. If the fish aren't enough, she adds wild veggies. Lars found some wild celery to the west. He also picked berries to fill his stomach, which were the easiest food for her to get. Lars gathered a whole bag full. She's really worried now, but Ashley is over the moon. She caught a lot of fish again today. This girl has incredible luck. Maybe it's because her spot has a strong current, so there are more fish. Every time she checks her nets, it's a pleasant surprise. Today, she hauled in over 100 pounds of fish. Ashley is grinning from ear to ear. If this keeps up, Ashley is probably a lock for the championship. But in my experience, the top performer rarely wins these shows. At the moment, Lars and Geo. There's a good chance for a comeback. Joe is still hiking today. This guy's impressive. He's been hungry for ages. He still has the energy to hike, bundled up in layers. As he climbs and heats up, he sheds a layer. By the time he's down to his last one, he's likely at the summit. He spots a deer antler on the barren ground. Too bad they didn't pack any hunting gear. It's a shame. Geo gets to the top to scout and suddenly strips down. I have no words for this. Lars has a pile of wood at the entrance of his shelter. He decides to use the scrap wood to make fishing tools. Lars takes his fishing tools to the shore with many hooks attached. He hopes to catch some fish with this setup. He stretches the fishing line across the water, hooks dangling, then sits down to eat some berries. He carries a cup of berries with him, eating a bit when he's hungry. Meanwhile, Ashley continues to improve her shelter, constantly working on it. While others are still struggling with food, Ashley decides to make a vent at the top of her shelter, probably for smoke ventilation. But this might not be effective. If it rains and leaks, it would be hilarious. At night, she cooks fish in her shelter. It seems the vent works well, as there's hardly any smoke despite the big fire. It's now day 19. Geo wakes up early to boil water. He needs to drink a lot of water daily, or he'll starve. Instead of fishing, he should drink water all day. He checks his fishing nets again today, but no luck. The weather is getting colder. Lars goes to relieve himself in the wild, surrounded by thick fog. The temperature drops daily. Ashley notices this too. The area is eerily silent. The cold doesn't faze him much, but within 10 minutes outside, his fingers are numb from the cold. He breathes on his hands to warm them. When he pulls up his fishing net, unsurprisingly, fish dangle from the net, but it's freezing today. Ashley keeps warming her hands with her breath. Finally, the old lady shows up, always exercising. If she's so fearless of the cold, she should just head back. Doing the 21st set of national middle school exercises here isn't a solution. Please, old lady, stop jumping. Meanwhile, Ashley has caught all the fish. She's living the best life right now. Seeing her catch so many fish, I want to join her for a night of survival.
Kesä, Silvia, Li, Ord, Sue, Ikekar. Yes, I get it all. Det nu vi pander fedt. Hold nu din kæft.
Every day she's here driving me crazy. I really can't take it. After her antics, she just cooks here while it's freezing outside. Why not build the fireplace inside the shelter? I didn't expect her to start crying. For heaven's sake, I didn't bully you. If you're upset, go home and argue with your husband. We have no grudges, don't mess with my mindset here. Ashley is out collecting wood. There's plenty of wood along the shore. The job looks simple, but carrying it is a bit tough. After her meal, Granny Sunny relaxed in the shelter. She put on new gloves, finally warm and cozy. Lars just finished moving stones and felt very hungry. He's modifying his fishing tools by the shore. But it doesn't seem to be working. If the net can't catch fish, he'll have to rely on fishing for luck. He stretched the fishing line across the river, hoping this method would work better. After setting the hooks, he just waits for a fish to bite. When he's interested, he goes hiking. Now he suddenly remembers he needs to eat. Granny Sunny seems to be struggling. The cold weather and not having enough to eat make it worse, especially as she gets older. Instead of fixing the shelter after eating, she babbles or sits by the fire. If you mention it, she cries. Granny just wants the show to give her $1 million to quit and go home. If not, she cries harder, saying it's too tough here. If it weren't for the winter boots, I would have thrown a slipper at her. It's now the 20th day. Lars got up early, packed his bag, and went hiking again. I don't understand why he carries so much stuff, as if he's moving camp. It's a waste of energy. No wonder he's starving and can't catch fish. The environment seems to favor him. Stunning mountains and waters. Maybe his wife will get a better husband if he's buried here. He's always in awe of the scenery. It looks like he's here to enjoy the world. It's very foggy now, so he uses a compass to navigate. I'm afraid he might die here and win the championship. Does he want to stand here and wait for the sunrise? Granny went to the shore to cook breakfast. She caught fish again today, but what I don't understand is why she cooks by the shore. No wonder she's freezing. Lars is hiking in the mountains. He finally saw the sunrise and the whole area is. He also spots a sea of clouds, which is stunning. He roams around, and when he gets tired, he sits down to rest. Looking at the snow-covered mountain peaks in the distance, he urgently needs to build a signal fire by the shore. What is this guy up to? If he wants to leave, he could just use the satellite phone. No one would notice the signal fire anyway. He's clearly just having some fun. I doubt Geo will stick around much longer. Lars gathered dry grass to sleep outside tonight, unafraid of wild animals. So he's not worried about sleeping outside. When night fell, he saw the northern lights. This guy sure knows how to have a good time. It's the 21st day. Sunny wakes up and boils water. Geo sits in his shelter, feeling the cold outside. He caught a small fish today. He quickly made a fire to cook it. After eating, he felt much better. Suddenly, the show's boat appeared again. Who's leaving the competition? It's Geo, the fun guy. What surprises await us in the next episode? Can't wait for the next video update. This is true wilderness survival. They cried when they finally ate meat, knowing how tough it was to get. It's day 21 and 3 contestants remain. Lars, the sea guy, spent last night camping in the wild. He woke up to a frozen sleeping bag. Sunny, shivering from the cold, still went out to make popsicles. But seeing the aurora last night made it all worth it. With the river frozen over and the biting cold, how could she sleep outside? Sunny was up early again, acting all wild. She was excited to see some sunshine today. Sunny went to the shore to check her fishing nets, hoping to catch some fish. The one having the best time right now is Ashley. Ashley doesn't have to worry about food or water, and her shelter is top-notch. Considering how she felt on day 1, she has now completely adapted to this place. Although the journey has been tough through her own efforts, she built a shelter in the wilderness and can now live here permanently. Her confidence is through the roof. She'll have no trouble snagging a husband with these skills when she returns. Meanwhile, Lars got up and started heading back. Others come to the wilderness to survive. He's here on vacation. Lars went to the shore and saw a fish teasing him in the water. He pulled the fishing line. Turns out he caught a fish. This fish was quite big and almost got away. Lars picked up the fish and gave it a few punches. The fish wasn't huge, but its meat was tender and tasty. Who knew this little pond had fish? Sunny had a great catch too, whacking fish with a stick. She was really going for it and ended up with quite a haul. Could this be a comeback? She fried a big pot of fish by the shore. Today's meal is bound to be a feast. Before eating, she deboned and minced the fish. Meanwhile, Lars still had half his fishing line in the water. He decided to wade in and get it. Isn't he worried about freezing to death? With his shoes still on, he stepped into the water to untangle the line. Fortunately, the water was shallow enough. As long as he kept his clothes dry, it was doable. He retrieved the fishing line but didn't catch any fish. This was a bit of a loss. His shoes were completely soaked. The shelter was quite far away, and walking such a long distance in wet shoes would likely be quite uncomfortable. Ashley heads to the shore, already singing as she checks the net. Today's catch is small, but still better than Sunny's. Sunny has had a full meal, while Lars is still struggling for food. Ashley remains consistent, and if she doesn't lose her mind wanting to get married, she might just make it to the end. Ashley is the front runner. With the weather getting colder, unless she slips up, she'll stay in the game. Lars manages to catch a fish every day. It's not great, but it's enough to survive. He keeps trying to fish with a line instead of using the perfectly good net he has. Ashley can catch several fish with one net. Can you even catch 2 with your line? He packs up and heads back to the shelter. Ashley sits by the shore and starts crying. What's happening? There's meat in the pot, but she's crying here. What's the deal? I was ready to declare you the winner, but now you're losing your focus in the final stretch. These contestants are impressive. Stay positive. What's there to worry about? If you keep crying like this, you'll sob your way out of winning. I'll cry my eyes out the day I go home because I'll always remember this place. Because I love this feeling in the moment. I don't look too good at all. Sunny, now full, gets to work. It's a relief not to stress about food. He sits and carves a walking stick. His mindset has improved a lot. Is he going to make a comeback and win? Lars is still hiking around. I have no idea what he's doing. He sees some grass on the ground and picks some to eat. The scenery is beautiful, but don't forget you're here to survive in the wild.
Nu skal jeg tage min gummistøvle på nu. Så om lidt, så skal jeg ned og sætte mit garn.
In no time, the old lady is perched on a rock singing, while Ashley mopes in the shelter. From my experience, Ashley's chances of winning are slim. If the old lady wins, it'll be hilarious. It's now the 22nd day. Lars wakes up to find the ground freezing. The weather's colder, making fishing tougher. He checks the net by the shore. A net spanning hundreds of square feet caught only one fish. Lars is having the hardest time. His daily food barely sustains him. Today, he caught 2 fish, not enough to fill him up, but enough to stave off starvation. Sonny checked his nets at the shore too. He only got 2 fish and wasn't too happy about it. At least he won't go hungry. Having some fish is a win. He even swore at me on camera. Darn it, I'll jinx you so you never win. Granny's always cooking up wild dishes using local ingredients and experimenting. Granny's got a great shot at winning thanks to her optimism and daily food hunts. Meanwhile, Ashley decided to go hiking today. Is she crazy? It's the last round and she's still burning energy fishing daily. Why not just play it safe and go for the prize money? He has already come to the top of the mountain, and this time it feels good to have a look at the mountains at the top of the spiritual cave, and he is not here to pull off. It's a pity. He stacked the stones. If it were me, I'd make a fish trap with them. Since that girl cried, she's been acting weird and losing her edge. Meanwhile, Sonny's getting her act together. He started exploring the area, but all the wood around is bare. Are these contestants out of their minds? Why is everyone hiking instead of fixing their shelters? They're just aimlessly wandering. If someone could build a decent wooden shelter, he's sure to win. Meanwhile, Lars is facing massive waves. Fishing in this stormy weather just got harder. Lars is battling the waves, trying to retrieve his net from the shore, but it's snagged on some rocks. What now? No net means no food. Lars tried everything to retrieve his net, but his odds of winning are dwindling. Meanwhile, Sonny lounges on a rock, tossing out snarky remarks. After finally getting 2 decent meals, he now chooses to waste his energy. But hey, it's better than Ashley sulking in her shelter. It's day 23, and this morning felt much colder. Ashley gets more excited as the challenges increase. For the cold-averse grandma, it's getting tough. The worse the weather, the bigger the test for the shelters. Lars woke up to find his shelter completely gone. This is hilarious. These contestants are so bad at building shelters. He's out there fixing his shelter in a storm. Why didn't he do it when the weather was good? Now he's scrambling. These contestants are incredibly lazy. Lars is definitely struggling the most. He's lost his shelter completely. Sonny heads to the shore to check the fishing nets. The waves are massive. He spots the nets in the water from the shore. But there were no fish. Another day without a catch? Lars looked at his shelter and felt like he was back to square one. He headed to the shore to check the net, hoping to catch some fish to eat before tackling the shelter. Lars stood there, pulling in the net. But the net was empty and tangled from the wind. He had to fix it first. No food yet, but he still needed to work on the shelter. Otherwise, he wouldn't make it through the night. Ashley checked his net. The catch was small, but at least he had some fish. Ashley's shelter was now the best. He hung the net on the shelter, and there were still a few fish in it. Lars was finally ready to build his shelter. I've never seen contestants start this late in the game. He decided to build a cone-shaped shelter, but this one was bigger and anchored to the trees. Why build it so high? The wind resistance would be huge. After constructing the frame with wood, he started fixing the net. It was a tangled mess and would take hours to sort out, but it was the easiest way to catch fish. If he couldn't eat, he'd be in trouble. The wind was strong today, and as he fixed the net, it kept getting blown away. Ashley, inside his shelter, felt the strong wind outside. He was also preparing to improve his shelter. Sonny also started working. She pressed branches around her shelter to prevent it from being blown away at night. This last-minute effort was quite effective. They quickly improved their shelters. Lars was ready to nail his shelter down. He had collected many nails from the wooden boards. In a day, he had rebuilt his shelter. Though it was windproof, it wasn't warm. He might struggle to sleep because of the wind, but it beat being outside. Ashley was cooking fish in his shelter. Feeling full made him much warmer. Hiding in the shelter, listening to the fierce wind outside, he felt excited. Sonny wasn't afraid of the wind anymore. These two women had a high chance of winning, while Lars had a tough time. If Lars didn't catch a big fish, he was in trouble. Sonny headed to the shore to set her net and began fishing once the wind died down. Lars showed up at the shore too. Did he honestly believe that old net would work? What surprises await us in the next episode? Stay tuned. Stay tuned for the next update. What is real wilderness survival like? After 27 days of hunger, he finally has a huge catch. This fish feels like $1 million. On day 24, 3 contestants remained. The wind was fierce. Sonny headed to the shore early to check the fishing net amid the huge waves. Sonny pulled up the fishing net from the water. The wind was so strong that the net was flapping around. You can tell at a glance if there are any fish. With such big waves, spending time fixing the net is just awful today. Ashley heads to the shore daily to gather firewood, a routine task for him. The wind is really strong outside. One wrong move and the stakes blow away. The wind and waves tangled the fishing net, taking ages to fix. Luckily, I managed to catch a fish. It's really tough to catch fish in this weather. Lars is having the hardest time right now. His shelter was blown down yesterday, and although he has rebuilt it, he still can't catch any fish. If this keeps up, he likely won't make it unless he catches a big fish soon. Grandma Sunny is out gathering wood. There are lots of small branches for burning, but she insists on sawing a big log. The wind is really strong, and though Grandma fears the cold, she stays out in it. He tires out before even splitting one log. No need to feel sorry for him. There are plenty of safer small branches nearby. Heading into the wilderness without thinking is a mistake. They could have avoided some pitfalls with better planning. Lars, meanwhile, is still concerned about food. He grabs a bottle he uses as a nighttime urinal and plans to turn it into a fishing device. He also used a piece of metal to make a fishing lure. Although he hadn't caught many fish, he kept trying to catch more. Ashley has almost finished organizing his fishing net. This net has brought him a lot of fish, and now he relies entirely on it for food. Despite the tough conditions, he caught a fish today, which lifted his spirits. One fish isn't much, but it will sustain him for another day. Yet, he consistently outlasted the others by a day. Ashley, on the other hand, caught the most fish due to her prime location. The fast-flowing water had more fish, and catching so many there gave Ashley a great sense of accomplishment. The shelter is well constructed. Lars is starving and must find food soon, or he won't last much longer. The rough waves make it hard for him to use a fishing net, so he grabs his homemade gear and heads to the shore. He attempts to fish for food. In good weather, he hikes, but with the current bad weather, he sticks to fishing. They're not starving yet, but they have no idea how to find food. He crafted a wooden hoe to dig up worms for bait. He only caught a fish once, showing just how bad Lars's luck is. Hopefully, he lands a big one soon. With waves like these, even the camera can't bear to watch. Sunny returned to the shelter. This old lady isn't too bright. She has always cooked outside, but with the wind so strong, she had no choice but to go back to the shelter. Life's tough for her as well. She spent hours trying to light a fire but failed. Frustrated, she yelled again. Ashley shared the shelter, and the difference was clear. The old lady struggled to start a fire, while Ashley did it effortlessly. As things stand, Ashley is doing the best.
Fiskene, de skal altså ikke spises.
They will have some sat in the nest. Sunny is just behind Ashley, while Lars is still out fishing. It's freezing, and he's standing out there, not catching anything. She's about to give up too. Rather than freeze out here, she might as well go back and sleep. Lars' shelter is just a tent, and the wind is fierce. Hiding inside was super loud. Sunny got a fire going, making it much warmer. But the smoke inside the shelter was unbearable, making it feel like you'd be smoked like jerky overnight. Poor Sunny couldn't stop rubbing his eyes, but it was still better than Lars' predicament. Meanwhile, Ashley was thriving. She was clearly a strong candidate for the championship. Her shelter is the sturdiest, and she's been eating well every day. As long as she stays focused and doesn't get distracted by thoughts of marriage, she's bound to win. Sunny has begun dinner, savoring the fish with her hands. Afterward, she grabs a wheel. This wheel can be made into a tool to pull in the fishing net, which often gets stuck. He took it to the shore to fix the net. Grandma is super eager to catch fish. If she keeps it up, she might give Ashley a run for her money in the championship. Lars is resting in the shelter. The wind is fierce, and there's a small vent in the roof. Thankfully, it's not raining now, but if it starts. At night, sleep was scarce. Grandma came back to the shelter, always watching the weather. No one knew how long the wind would keep up. She uses a stick to count the days. Everyone is huddled in their shelters. In this weather, I believe the contestants are beginning to show signs of. I predict someone will soon drop out. It's tough to guess who will be the first to leave. In many seasons of Alone, the top performer doesn't always win. Grandma is currently in the middle of the pack, but she has a good chance of winning. Lars is also doing well, but she hasn't caught any fish. If she can catch fish, that's another story. Right now, Ashley is doing the best. This girl just wants to marry an old man. If she can't shake that and leaves to get married, she'll lose the $1 million prize. She's crying again, tormented by the loneliness and cold. Even the biggest fire can't warm her heart. Meanwhile, Grandma. When she's bored, she can entertain herself. You can tell from the toys she makes. Despite her age, she's always been into wooden toys. They've been cooped up in the shelter all day and are really bored. My sister thinks it's dull too. It's the 25th day now. This morning, Ashley was singing. She was crying her heart out yesterday, and now she's in such a good mood? That can't be a good sign. After drinking water, she seemed like a new person. Grandma's not doing well. He's unsure how much longer he can last here. He has no idea how the others are faring. This waiting game is the worst kind of torture. Suddenly, the show's boat appeared. Which contestant is going to quit? Lars hasn't caught any fish, but he's in very good condition. He strolls outside the shelter after waking up. Any contestant could quit at this point. Astley, in red stockings and looking unusually sexy, is getting ready for breakfast. He's the only one with fish left to eat. He's unlikely to quit. If he were, he'd skip breakfast and head home for a feast instead. Grandma Sunny is babbling in the shelter and starts crying. If you want to cry, do it at home. This show is for tough folks. Sunny feels it's very difficult. He wants the show to give him $1 million to go home. But what surprised me was that Astley was the first to quit. He stood by the shore, watching the show's boat come, saying he felt very lonely and isolated here. This is Alone, where the goal is to test contestants' ability to endure loneliness. Astley just couldn't handle it. No matter how well he was doing, he wouldn't win. His withdrawal surprised me. Everyone said he would win if he didn't go crazy wanting to get married. He was sure to win the championship. His exit essentially gave Sunny and Lars a clear shot. Lars went to check the fishing net. Of the three, Lars struggled the most. He tugged at the fishing net, which seemed stuck again. Granny Sunny joined the wilderness too, but her shoulder pain was unbearable. This can't continue. The top contestant already left, and the second was struggling with health. Why didn't you mention it sooner? Lars tugged the fishing net hard. If it keeps coming up empty, she won't last long here either. But luckily, today the net caught a small fish, giving Lars another day of survival. At this point, Granny was really down. She lost interest in staying and started crying again while talking. She had already cried countless times today. Then, the show's boat showed up again. Granny decided to quit. Oh my god. Sunny and Astley seem to be doing fine. Why did they break down so suddenly? Is Lars just going to win by default now? The top performer didn't clinch the title. The one who struggled the most did. By the 26th day, Lars went exploring. Lars went out exploring, and the day flew by. The show brought in Lars' family, who were thrilled about the big prize. Lars rose early and headed to the shore, hoping to find fish in the net. To his surprise, today's catch was huge, including a big fish. What does it mean to catch so many fish on the last day? But before he could eat, the show crew arrived. Lars feared he'd be forced to quit due to his starvation. He was anxious, but then came a surprise. Lars won the championship and received $1 million prize. Once again, a season where strong contestants lost to a lucky one. That's a wrap for this season. Like and follow for more wilderness survival content.
At se min familie komme. Jeg har set frem til det på en måde. Altså, jeg havde haft... Prøv lige at stå og kigge her engang. Så jeg kunne se...